Aloha, and welcome to An Oral History, The Life of Calvin Say. This is the second of a 6-part series. Last time we talked about Speaker Say's childhood. Today we're going to talk about his college years and his young adult years. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Dina Poma Barnes. And thank you, Speaker, for sharing today with us.
Thank you very much for the opportunity of interviewing me, and I'm really happy to be a part of this course of interviews that we'll be going through.
Thank you. Okay, let's start with the college years. What years you went to college, what college you went to, what
I
you
started
studied?
off the fall of 1970 as the University of Hawaii freshman, and I still recall the days where I was were very worried during that period in time, from the 68, 69, 70, 71, and it was because of the Vietnam War that was going on. And the generation that I was part of, the graduating class of 1970, we were on the bubble as far as the draft. And I can still recall the days when we were watching the television with the ping pong balls popping out of the machine. And if you were a certain number, I think the first 120 something, you were either drafted or you had to enlist into the service. And that's where it was very, very scary. But I was very fortunate that I did get accepted as a freshman in the fall of 1970 to the University of Hawaii. Even that period in time, I started to work at the old Flamingo Chuck Wagon, which is no longer in existence. It was a time where, it was fun times. I didn't get my license until I was 21, Dina, and it's hard to believe because I used to ride my 10-speed bike, going to school, coming home, playing basketball, football with the friends who were classmates of mine in Palolo Valley, but also attending the university was very exciting. I can recall the days when we had the Hawaiian Renaissance, where we had Hawaiian entertainment at the Andrews Amphitheater. I still recall the days where you had the demonstrations in regards to the anti-war, Vietnam War, etc. And I still recall the days when Governor Abercrombie was my American Studies professor up at the University of Hawaii.
And what did you study at the University of Hawaii?
I studied basically political science and American Studies, and I got my degree in 4 years. I was taking about 18 to 21 courses.
Wow.
But in the end, at the semester ending, probably 18 credits that I did get as far as passing my exams. So I did the university thing as far as a bachelor's of education in 4 years. Then I worked on my 5th year certificate, and after that, that was it.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Renaissance, the Hawaii Renaissance, during that time, what it was like being a student?
It was really, really enjoyable. It was a Hawaiian Renaissance of its music and its dance. I can recall going to Waikiki a lot, listening to the Sons of Hawaii, Eddie Kamai and the Sons of Hawaii. I recall Palani Vaughn and his group. And one group that I really enjoyed was the Sunday Manoa. Peter Moon and his 2 brothers, the Casimiro brothers. And those were the days where you had to go into International Marketplace, where you know what International Marketplace is, Cox Roofs. You had a very good entertainer there, Iva Kinimaka. I was very fortunate that I got to see my classmates and good friends from the old Hanabata days, the Kamakaveveoles, Skippy and Israel. And also their uncle Mo Keali, who also lived in Palolo Valley on 9th and Kalua. But it was the days where you had this renaissance of instilling the Hawaiian culture once more. I was also very privileged to have the opportunity of a young lady who taught me how to dance.
Okay.
It was called Magic Hula Studio, and the individual instructor was Auntie Rose Joshua. And she was a fantastic dancer because all of her daughters became entertainers in the Hawaiian hula that traveled throughout the United States in performing. And that was just a part of it, whereby then you had to learn about slack key guitar, the steel guitar, and all of this. It was just fabulous in instilling the Hawaiian music. One individual that I got to have some, I would call Kanikapila o Paina, was one afternoon with my good friend Russell Sakamoto, who was in the House of Representatives 2 years later, that he invited me to the Pahanuis in Waimanalo, Pops Gabby Pahinui. And they used to sing and and sing all of this kind of slack key and whatever you may call it. It was so much fun. And those are the experiences I was very fortunate to be a part of, in experiencing just a segment of the Hawaiian Renaissance in the area of the performing arts and musicians.
Wow. During your college years, in addition to the Renaissance and going to college, you also ran for office while you were still a student. Is that right? Or
I already graduated in
graduated,
'74. In '75, I did teach at Roosevelt in Kalani at 1 year, and in 1974 I ran and I lost. And how I got hoodwinked into it was one evening, after working at the chuck wagon, we all went, my classmates and I, who were all dishwashers or busboys, into the Silver Dollar Bar, which is a bar in the restaurant. And then, after a few beers, they were challenging each other. "Oh, Dino, why don't you run for office?" "No, why don't you run for office?" Then I said, "Okay, I'll run for office on the premise that you folks all co-sign with me and, walk house to house." And that was the start of just someone challenging one another. And then, taking this first step, the courage. And in 1974, I did lose in the primary by about 350 to 400 votes. Then in 1975, 76, the classmates said, "Why don't you run in 76?" And I ran. And since 1976 till today, I've been very privileged and honored to be in public office, primarily in the State House of Representatives, which I've really enjoyed because you basically know your district, you know your families, that your classmates' families and friends and neighbors, etc. That made it much easier.
So you've been in office now for 37 years.
Correct.
So I'm sure it's changed quite a bit. If you can take us back now to 74, 76, how did you do your campaigning and fundraising? I know you had quite a lot of resources and friends that you grew up with.
Yes. It was a very low-key campaign, let me say this. What happened is that I was very lucky. Mom and Dad was very supportive, my mom and dad. Mom and Dad would, once when I decided to run, the first fundraiser we had was a $5 stew and rice dinner.
Okay.
We would cook the stew at home and the rice and take it to Jarrett Intermediate School or Middle School. The cafeteria was where we had our fundraiser. And then Dad would also have friends that he was a baseball coach for the Pololo Indians, and his friends would set up different type of coffee hours for me in the district. So that was the grassroots, and I ran, when I first ran, I covered the district twice by myself, going house to house. And in 1976, thanks to everyone, I got elected. And it was basically a grassroots, trying to cover the district at least twice. And in those days, I think a lot of the general public will forget, it was a multi-member district, meaning it was a 2-member district. So even if you came in second, you were elected. And I can recall when I first ran for office, it was called the 16th district, where it encompassed all of St. Louis Heights, all the way to Monolani Heights and Waialae as a boundary line. And it can just show you how the population has migrated to the west side of Oahu. So today, the district that I represent is just a single-member district. And in 1980, it was CONCON that pushed the issue of a single-member district, and that's how we converted in 1980 to a single-member district, 82 election.
So you're still a very, very young man, maybe 23 years?
24.
24?
Yes.
How did you become knowledgeable about the issues of, there's just so many things that you need to know about.
I was an analyst first for 1 year, watching the issues, and it was very exciting times because that was the years, I believe, that Senator Nadao Yoshinaga and others did push for the prepaid health. That type of an issue, which is far-ranging, very progressive as far as health insurance for all individuals here in the state of Hawaii who are employees, laid the groundwork for a lot of other states to follow. One of my greatest mentors, I would say, was Speaker Wakasuki, Senator Tony Kunimura, Representative Tony Kunimura, who became a mayor of the island of Kauai, Speaker Henry Peters. There's a lot of individuals who really helped and supported me throughout my career, which I'm very privileged to have met them. One of my idols really was Governor Burns. Caucasian, a police officer running for public office and trying to do what is the social justice type that we as a minority had to focus our vision and our goal on the greater good of our community and sometimes the social injustice that occurred with the law that we had on the books. So, we were very, very fortunate to have a person of his stature because he opened the door for the Democratic Party along with Mr. Bob Oshiro, the father of Marcus Oshiro, who were the stalwarts in getting this Democratic Party moving.
What was it like back then? I know Hawaii is a predominantly Democratic state now,
yes.
both the executive and legislative branch. What was it like
It
when
was
you were?
a great majority of Democrats.
Okay.
But there was a bipartisanship because we had a lot of Republicans also. Not to the degree that it is today, but a lot more Republicans worked with Democrats because it was a multi-member district before, like I said to you, versus today, which is a single member. Democrats and Republicans had to work for the greater good of their community and their district that they represented. And I would say for the Senate, it was very, very cordial. In the House, it was very, very cordial also. And we had the respect for one another as far as in the old days. But it was fascinating because there was a lot of individual members of the House who would always speak up. People that I can recall when I first got elected, there was a champion for the Office of Hawaiian Affairs was Representative Kinau Boyd Kamali'i. Other members of the Republican side was Representative Barbara Marumoto, Andy Poi Poi, who became the small business administrator here in the state of Hawaii, Fred Roethling. I still remember one term when John Leopold was a senator who's now in the East Coast that got arrested for some of his wrongdoings as a mayor of a particular county. And who else? Ike Sutton. He was a great man. Faith Evans, who became a U.S. Marshal, Donna Ikeda, a great bunch of Republicans along with Democrats that I enjoyed really working with.
Okay, and you also had the opportunity to be a chairman of a committee quite young.
Yes, I did, and I was very privileged because it was a young representative by the name of Kate Stanley who told me, you know, Calvin, even though you're a freshman, why don't you take a chairmanship? You know, and I did to take the chairmanship, which was known as a Committee on Culture and the Arts. I did it for 4 years, and that's where I was very fortunate to be a part of the Hawaiian Renaissance and the return of Ko'olawe. I can still recall the Friday afternoon when Mama Loa testified, and during that hearing, which is a House concurrent resolution stopping the bombing of Ko'olawe, in our conference room, I was shocked and so scared. Why? On one side, you had all the military brass, you know, the Navy, all in white. And then on the other side, all my good friends, the Hawaiian activists, from Walter Riddy to Emmett Aluli to Daviana McGregor to George Helm to Richard Sawyer, etc., etc. And I didn't know what to do after the hearing was completed. Do I support the resolution, which is to stop the bombing, which is what my good friends want, or do I support the brass, the military, the Navy, right? Because it was the Navy that was doing the bombing along with the Air Force. And a lot of times, the Navy had a lot of workers at the Pearl Harbor base. So at that point, that afternoon, boy, I was saying to myself, what am I going to do? So the first thing that came to my mind, time out, recess, and I ran downstairs to see Speaker Wakasuki along with Majority Leader Henry Peters. In about a half an hour later, I came back up and we decided to defer the measure and work on a work group. That we so did. And the work group worked very well because it became a task force where we went to visit the island of Ko'olawe with the Navy brass. And it was a very exciting time. Hakio'ewa, which is a place where you would land. I still recall attending this ADS, A-D-Z, the rock quarry, ADS, and getting to a point on the island where you could look straight, I think, west or east to the channel that takes you to Tahiti.
Wow.
Or to the South Pacific. These are the experiences that I really enjoyed. Then having the experience of hobnobbing with the rich and famous of Hawaii. And that was the Symphony Society group that always came in once a year for a granting aid of $25,000 to support the society in their promotion of their events that they have. One of my most chicken skin times was when I was privileged to see and watch one of the greatest hula dancers in Hawaii, and her name was Iolani Luahini. And how graceful she was performing in front of the Iolani Palace, all in white, with a headband of that orange feathered headband. It was so chicken skin that I still recall her performing for a group. Other issues those years was the historic preservation, the restoration of Iolani Palace, Hula Palace, some of the restoration of our heiaus throughout the state, and just helping everyone in the arts. One issue, or one legislation that was passed before my time, which I'm very proud to be supportive, has been the arts and state buildings. That 1% of our construction costs is set aside for the acquisition of arts. May it be sculptures, may it be portraits, may it be paintings. That is, a testament to the vision of the Democrats who were in office that had the vision for the arts.
Well, exciting times.
Yes, it is,
Very
and
exciting times.
I'm happy to share that with all of you because when I talk about these names, sometimes a lot of the younger generation may not know. Yeah, and today I'm just happy to share some of those experiences too, as far as meeting all these individuals throughout the career that I've had so far. So it was 4 years as Culture in the Arts Chair. Then the third term, which is my fifth and sixth year, I became the Chair of Tourism, where we opened up the floodgates of the Japanese visitors, where Congress then allowed the Japanese visitors to bring in $10,000. Before, you couldn't bring $10,000 in to buy stuff. And that's where the duty-free shops began to develop. And that was the beginning of the Japanese tourists that came to Hawaii. That was in the early 80s. So I did that for 2 years. And then after that, with the concurrence of the new incoming Speaker, Henry Peters, I became the Chair of Water, Land, Youth Development, and Hawaiian Affairs. Those were great times too, because those years we were trying to implement a lot of the constitutional amendments of the 1980 CONCON, 78 CONCON, excuse me. Then you have the legislation. And it was controversial a lot of times. The Water Commission, the Important Ag Lands, the creation of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, all of this was a time.
Can you go a little bit more into the CONCON? That's the Constitutional Convention, correct?
78 CONCON,
Okay.
yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? And
I wasn't involved in that because they gave us a choice. You can run for re-election for the State House or run for CONCON. And most of the individual members of the House stayed out of the CONCON. But that was the beginning of Governor John Waihe. He ran for CONCON, then he ran for the State House. Speaker Suki Joe Suki was in CONCON in 1978. Barbara Marumoto, Carol Fukunaga, and others, you see. And that became their stepping stone in running for public office. But 78 CONCON was a great convention where a lot of things were accomplished for the greater good of the people of the state of Hawaii. And I'm very happy that I was just a small part of it, not in the Constitutional Convention, but in the legislature in implementing these amendments to our state constitution. The debt ceiling that we have, a balanced budget that we have, it is all part of our state constitution that we have to abide by.
and why was the convention established?
It was established because every 10 years we are given the opportunity of having a convention. And sometimes it has to be approved or sometimes disapproved. In this case, it was approved so that we could get some amendments done to the Constitution to transition from an agricultural society to a information technology society to a tourism society, etc.
And were there subsequent conventions after the 78, 80?
No.
You first-
After the 78 CONCON, we haven't had any constitutional convention. There was other issues that's part of the Constitution whereby you have collective bargaining every 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
and that is to support our public employee workers. And there are other issues that try to address the issues of what is the future for the state of Hawaii? What is your vision? What is the state plan, etc. And these were all the different issues of our convention that occurred in 78, which today we are still working on.
What a pivotal time in Hawaii's government.
Yes, it is. And I'm just privileged that I had the opportunity of being a part of the implementation and not the creation of all of these constitutional amendments.
Well, that's a great segment into the last question I'll probably ask you today.
Yes.
Another pivotal time in your life.
Yes.
Why don't you tell us how you met your wife, Cora?
Well, how I met her, it was not a fluke or an accident, but more, I think it was just a timing.
Mm-hmm.
She had 3 of her girlfriends, which is her college girlfriends that were all part of a sorority called the BBGs, or Beta Beta Gamma. And her 3 girlfriends worked for one of these representatives from Kapahulu, Representative Ken Kiapu, who was the chairman of tourism. And Cora's girlfriends were all beautiful young girls that all the guys used to go to Ken Kiapu's office just to flirt with the 3 girls. And Cora would come by and talk stories with the girlfriends to go out after that, after Friday evening, to go out, you know, party and have some fun. And that's how I met her, in the hallway. I introduced myself, she introduced herself, we talked story, and then, you know, my friend said, well, she's going to go to this house on Saturday. And I said, well, maybe I can come after work. So I met her at a home in Palolo, one of her girlfriend's friend's house, where they had a party. And we were talking stories, and that's how we just talked and hit it off. But I'm very lucky, I'm very fortunate that I met a young lady who was very, very patient, very understanding. And she stayed with me now for 32 years.
And you met her in the same malls that you work in today.
Yes, I have, and that's why I think she may understand what I'm going through as far as being a wife of a politician. It's very difficult, because sometimes people don't realize that you have a career that you really focus yourself on. And Cora had a career too, which is teaching. So when we both were married in 1981, she was teaching, but she was teaching in the countryside, because beginning teachers always had to start off in the outskirts or in the country and work their way back into Honolulu, because the senior teachers would rather live, you know, teach in Honolulu, which is much more closer to where they have, you know, have their families and their, you know, so forth. So from Sunset, she moved into Kailipulu, which is in Kailua, then on to Kalawela, then on to Lanakila. So it's been 33 years, and she's since retired last year in June. But yeah, I'm very fortunate to have a young lady, a young wife, I always call her a young and lovely individual who is understanding of what I have to go through, and her patience. Sometimes you wonder if it's worth it for a young lady, a wife, and a mother to not have the time with the husband that often, because it was difficult. She would leave at 6 in the morning. I would be sign waving at 6 in the morning. And then when the first son came on board, Grandma Kotake was the one that took care of them. And that's been, you know, a part of how we have grown together as, you know, a husband and a wife.
Well, congratulations for being together for that long period of time, 32 years.
Well, we hope we can reach that 50, yeah? But who knows?
All right, and we'll definitely hear more about that in
Yes.
later segments.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Speaker, for sharing with us today. And thank you for joining us. I hope you join us for the next segment, which will be the life of a legislator. And we'll look more deeply into Speaker Say's experience here at the House of Representatives. Mahalo, and see you next time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.